Welcome to episode 2, South Africa from Settlement to Current Crisis. Today we're looking at the architects, the British role, the Boer War, and the concentration camps. As I was saying to you earlier on, most people think that apartheid was an Afrikaner invention. That's not actually true, partly, but not completely, because the British were the true architects of apartheid in this country. Okay, let's decode this. In 1795, we're going to do a little history lesson here. I know I should have paid more attention at school. Few things I paid attention to there, I'll have you all know. Now it's catching up with me later on in life. Anyway, in 1795, the British took control of the Cape from the Dutch. So that's almost 2 decades later. They brought their own settlers, the 1820 settlers as we know them here, as well as their own governance system, which was pretty much the foundations of what would eventually become apartheid. Because when we fast forward a little bit to 1948, the 1948 elections, the Nats, the Nationalist Party, won that election there. It did not have to radically rewrite the South African laws because the foundations were already in place, right? So let's go through this here and let's just delve a little deeper. In 1913, the Natives Land Act. This is often cited as a cornerstone of apartheid. It was a British colonial law drafted by the likes of Cecil John Rhodes and enacted under the British influence Union government. It reserved a mere 7% of land for Black African population, who comprised of 60% of the people. 7% of the land for 67% of the people. Make this make sense, please. The 1910 Union Constitution. When the Union of South Africa was formed in 1910 under British oversight, its constitution, which entrenched white political power, was drawn up and approved by the British government. Winston Churchill. Churchill, as a member of the British government, helped give the Transvaal the power to withhold the vote from native Africans. The British laid the foundations. The Afrikaner Nationalist Party just simply built the edifice, right? Oh my. Okay, so now we're seeing how original settlers actually became colonizers, as they kind of entrenched their way into the Khoisan people via slave trade and building colonies, etc. Right? Now, a couple of years later, we're seeing the British come with already a system and enforcing it here in South Africa. And then later on in years, in 1948, those elections, as I was saying, there was no need to rewrite many laws. Well, okay, let's dismantle that. The discovery of gold in the Transvaal, which is now Gauteng, then Transvaal, triggered a conflict that will shape South Africa for generations and is still shaping it, actually. The first Boer War was 1880 to 1881. That was a Boer victory. Okay. The next one came in 1899 to 1902. And that one was very, very different. The British had a couple of years to accumulate what they knew they needed for these conditions, for the people, for their enemy, right? So they armored up. They really did. It was brutal, and it was a war of attrition, actually. The British used scorched earth tactics, as we know, burning farms, destroying homesteads, placing women and children predominantly in concentration camps. And man, those numbers were staggering. I think approximately 28,000 to 30,000 Boers died in British concentration camps during that time. And it was from things like measles, respiratory conditions, any like type of diseases, typhoid, all those type of diseases that were going around. And really, we understand in these conditions, they travel fast, right? So, and also 80% of those who died were children, as well as an additional approximately 20,000 Black Africans died in these camps, though it was not much reported at the time. But I want to remind you of a show I did on actually a couple of weeks back, right, where we talk about the German colonization of Southwest Africa, then now Namibia. And I went into quite a bit of detail as to what happened with the Herero and predominantly the Nama people. And so now we're seeing how the British concentration camps of the Boer War were actually like a precursor to the camps that would later be used in the Holocaust. They were the first time that the British used them on this scale, on such a large scale. So again, hello, guinea pig, Africa, South Africa being your guinea pig for the Holocaust. Actually, before that in Southwest Africa. So let's look at how we reorganize this, shall we? So the truth is really that the British imperial policy and Afrikaner nationalism were intertwined in a very complex and often contradictory partnership. But nonetheless, two sides of the same coin, the same pattern, right? We talk about pattern recognition. One was feeding the other. The one kind of, needed the other. The Boer War ended with British victory, but in the peace, they essentially gave the Boer republics the green light to disenfranchise all non-whites. How did they do this? By granting self-government to the former Boer republics. The British handed the keys of political power over the Black majority to the white minority. Think about that. Wow. Let's see a pattern here. If you're watching my show from 2 weeks ago when I spoke about the monster changes faces, that's exactly what happened there too. Are we seeing that pattern? How after the Brits had done that to the Boers, and then after the British won the war, they then pretty much told all the Boers in the Boer republics to disenfranchise, or gave them the green light to disenfranchise all non-whites. So they gave the minority that they had just persecuted right? Rule over the majority for them to persecute. So now again, we see how the Boer becomes the persecutor of African people. Whereas before, they lived together quite civilly. Yes, there was slavery, but initially there was no apartheid. Let's remember that as well. This thing was learnt over time. This thing was systematically installed over time. A shared legacy. Again, the British built the foundation. The Afrikaners built the edifice. So, how do we choose? In the next episode, we look at how the edifice of this architecture, if you will, became the machine and how that machine was handed over. Join me for that. But in the meantime, don't ever forget, decode, dismantle, reorganize, choose. Choose differently. It's the only way we're going to choose differently when we move forward. Have a beautiful week. Have a beautiful day. If this broke something open, if you recognized yourself in the testimony, if your body responded before your mind understood, the next step isn't more information. It's pattern work. Decode what your nervous system built to survive. Dismantle the story that keeps it running. Reorganize through the body and choose, actually choose from the person you're becoming, not from the pattern that formed when you were too small to choose. That's Solutions. Link below. The body is the record. Let's listen.